Retcons have always been a part of Star Wars. Sometimes a retcon can mean the addition of more information, changing what came before. Sometimes a retcon is necessary for continuity, even if that continuity is in itself a retcon of another continuity. And sometimes a retcon means huffing and puffing and blowing the entire house down. Retcon, noun, a piece of new information that imposes a different interpretation on previously described events, typically used to facilitate a dramatic plot shift or account for an inconsistency. Let's look at some retcons, big and small, some contradictions, some things I just find interesting. And we'll even take a look at a few fan reactions. In the 1996 novella, The Last One Standing, The Tale of Boba Fett, and the 1995 Essential Guide to Characters, Boba Fett's real name was Jaster Mereel. But after Attack of the Clones showed that Boba Fett was a clone of Jango Fett, Jaster Mereel was retconned to be a completely different character. Alan Dean Foster was commissioned to write a Star Wars novel, and that novel was called Splinter of the Mind's Eye. It was released in 1978, and was the first expanded universe novel. Splinter of the Mind's Eye was written to be the sequel to Star Wars, and it was going to be used to make a sequel film, if one was ever going to be made. But when Star Wars became the biggest pop culture phenomenon ever, Splinter of the Mind's Eye was scrapped, and the sequel went in a completely different direction. In the novelization of Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi said that Owen Lars was his brother. The young reader's novel, Jedi Apprentice, released in 1999, also mentioned Obi-Wan's brother as Owen Lars. And Owen Lars was explicitly described as the, quote, brother of Obi-Wan Kenobi, close quote, in the Star Wars customizable card game re-released in 1995. Aurebesh first appeared in Return of the Jedi. It can be seen at the beginning of the movie on a monitor as Darth Vader's shuttle approaches the second Death Star. And you might be saying, Greedo, Aurebesh is in A New Hope. It's in the very first Star Wars. But that was a special edition change. Stephen Crane is the designer of the Aurebesh alphabet. At the time, Crane worked for West End Games, and in 1993, he began developing an alphabet for the tabletop game Star Wars Miniatures Battles. In 1996, punctuation was added. As we know, Stephen Crane's 34-letter alphabet has made its way into numerous Star Wars works. Timothy Zahn described the Clone Wars a lot different in his Thrawn trilogy, which was written from 1991 to 1993, than what was presented in the prequels or the animated show. Zahn hinted at the Republic fighting insane clones, the clones were fighting the Republic from the jump, and the clones were being led by clone masters. Chewbacca was killed in the EU, now coined Legends, in 25 ABY by standing in a moon's trajectory, howling defiantly, and being crushed to death. In the 1978 series, The Constancia Affair, Luke Skywalker's parents were named Master and Mistress Tan Skywalker. Later down the road, after the name Anakin was first revealed in Return of the Jedi, the name Tan was retconned to be a title or a rank rather than a name, and this rank was given to skilled pilots. Originally, the Dark Jedi Jerec wore a blindfold because his eyes were destroyed by the dark side of the Force. In Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, it's mentioned that he once had eyes, and later down the road, that was retconned. And Jerec was no longer human, he became a member of the Miraluka? I don't know how that's pronounced, which is an eyeless species. Measuring time in units of BBY, before the Battle of Yavin, was a system that was originally used as a dating system by fans. And after it gained popularity, BBY became an in-universe measurement of time used by the New Republic. It was originally established that Tarkin received the design for the Death Star by Wraith Sinar, but Attack of the Clones showed that the Geonosians gave the plans to Dooku, who gave them to Sidious, after they received the details from Sinar. Oh, the Death Star has a whole lot of changes over the decades. The title President of the Senate was originally the name of the Republic's leader. The prequels changed that to the Supreme Chancellor, and President of the Senate was retconned to be one of many of the Supreme Chancellor's titles. In Episode 4, A New Hope, Ben Kenobi says that the Old Republic existed for 1,000 generations. The EU, now Legends, interpreted 1,000 generations to mean the Old Republic stood for 25,000 years. But in Attack of the Clones, Palpatine said that the Republic stood for 1,000 years, which conflicted with everything that was already established in the EU. To fix this, the Ruusan Reformation, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but the Ruusan Reformation was created to explain many differences between what was known as the G canon, which stood for George Lucas canon, and the C canon, the continuity canon. The Ruusan Reformation was a reorganization of the entire Galactic Republic, and it was created as a retcon to smooth out the differences in the timeline. An entire chunk of time was created to explain another chunk of time. All because Palpatine said 1,000 years in the film instead of 1,000 generations. Crazy. In the Ewok films, Wicket learns how to understand Basic, but in Return of the Jedi, he doesn't understand when Leia's speaking to him. The explanation for this seems to be a little playful. In Star Wars Insider 87, it is said that the characters in the Ewok films weren't actually speaking Basic. They were actually speaking a different language, but it was translated to English for English-speaking audiences to understand. You guys know how I like my time machine, so let's jump into a forum post from 2011. I can't resist. Very pissed off fan. I feel like I have been lied to. Do your freaking homework, George and Dave. This is not just for kids. The real fans read and care. This is all in regards to some Mandalorian changes that appeared in the Clone Wars animated show. Did they even read the books? I love George and Dave's work on the Clone Wars, but they have pooped the bed on this one. Boba Fett did not find his armor. He is a freaking Mando, for God's sake. He is a Mandalore. As far as I'm concerned, they took a big crap on the EU and all the Star Wars fans and half the writers that have contributed to the EU, and most of the Dark Horse stuff has been deleted. Everything you thought you knew about Mandos is gone. Tread carefully, George and Dave. Just because you were telling the story does not mean you can change what has been done. The last 15 years of EU books and comics have been forever regarded as nothing to George, and that means he doesn't care about us or what we believe Star Wars to be. And then the commenter below says, what actually ruined the Mandalorians was the Fandalorians. Fandalorians, thinking they are gods among men. It turns out a lot of people didn't like the Clone Wars and what the Clone Wars changed. And that's a good springboard for a little short trip down a long rabbit hole. Join me, won't you? Until I started researching this video, I had no idea about the Mandalorian controversy in the fandom, especially surrounding the Clone Wars. Now this is all new to me. I've never been the biggest Mandalorian fan, but it seems like there were 3 phases or types of Mandalorian fans. Mandalorians first debuted in a 1983 comic book which describes Boba Fett as a super commando in charge of super commandos. Mandalorians were present in other comics through the 90s, and then an author by the name of Karen Traviss wrote 5 Republic Commando novels, among other Star Wars novels, and her depiction of Mandalorians were a little different than what came before. What came before seemed to be more of a cartoonish depiction of warriors, Klingonish, if you will. And then Karen Traviss gave them a little bit of a deeper characterization. But her depictions of the Mandalorians were a little different than what came before, and the people who liked how the Mandalorians used to be were all upset with Traviss. And then when Mandalorians first appeared in season 2 of the Clone Wars show, people were even more up in arms about how the Mandalorians were depicted. And those people defended Travis's books and the way she created a lot of the Mandalorian lore. So it's like there's 3 phases of Mando love, 3 phases of Mando hate. This shit is interesting to me. And kinda sad. It's cyclical silliness for sure. I like the way they used to be. I like the way they used to be. I like the way they used to be. Will this happen again with the new Mandalorian show? Probably. Because people. Wahahaha. Nice to see the Clone Wars finally trampled on something I don't care about for once. Everything new seems to alter something old. Whatever you love, just know that when it was made, someone fucking hated it because it stepped on their thing. Fun! Kyle Katarn originally stole the Death Star plans on Danuda in Dark Forces. As we know now, that was retconned with the release of Rogue One. Anakin Skywalker was promoted to Jedi Knight at the beginning of the Clone Wars in the Clone Wars micro series, and in the novel Jedi Trial, he became a Jedi Knight at the end of the Clone Wars. Leia remembers her mom in Return of the Jedi, but her mom, as we know, died in childbirth. And she's not remembering her adoptive mother, she's remembering her birth mother. And that's according to, I can't remember, it's 4 a.m. Now, obviously, this was because Leia's backstory hadn't been written and fully fleshed out yet. It's a line said for effect. It's a line said for a little bit of emotion in the scene. Now, over the years, a bunch of "it was the Force who gave her amazing baby memory powers" explanations were applied, which is fine, whatever. The episode 3 novelization says that she, quote, stared intently in Padme's direction, as if she wanted to memorize her face, close quote. A line to fit in with the line from Return of the Jedi, I suppose. Whenever anything is said, for whatever reason, there has to be a cut and dry explanation, I guess. And it can sometimes feel a little goofy. But what I find interesting in all of this is the new canon Return of the Jedi novelization released in 2015. It adds a line of thought in Leia's brain during the exchange between Leia and Luke. Quote, "She was very beautiful, kind, but sad," says Leia. But she is unsure how she knows this. Unsure, in fact, if she really did ever see her mother, or just invented these memories to fill the hole in her life. Close quote. I like that. We're unsure. She's unsure. So many layered retcons and fan fillers. It's interesting. In the original 1983 Return of the Jedi novelization written by James Caan, Han tries to convince the Ewoks to help the rebels by telling them that the Empire was draining Endor's resources. But that, along with C-3PO's story, don't convince them to help. It's Wicket who convinces the tribe to help the rebels.
A few rapid-fire retcons and changes you probably already know.
Greedo now takes a shot at Han in the 1997 Special Edition change. Bye-bye, Sebastian Shaw. It was nice knowing ya. This was the original Emperor in 1980's The Empire Strikes Back, and this was the Emperor in the 2004 DVD release. Boba Fett's voice was changed in the 2004 DVD release from Jason Wingreen to Tamora Morrison. Anakin's eyebrows were removed in the 2004 DVD release. A new song called Victory Celebration replaced Yub-Nub at the end of Return of the Jedi in the 1997 Special Edition. Shots of Coruscant, Bespin, and Tatooine celebrating the end of the Galactic Empire were added to the 1997 Special Edition. And in the 2004 DVD release, a shot of Naboo was added. A Yoda puppet was used in the theatrical release of The Phantom Menace, and for the Blu-ray release in 2011, the puppet was replaced by a CGI model. Darth Maul didn't die. The Emperor didn't die. There are now lots of Emperors. Boba Fett didn't die either. He got out of the Sarlacc pit. Neato. Wait, the previous EU was scrapped. Does that mean Boba Fett did actually die? Well, that's not confirmed or denied in the new canon. It hasn't been decided yet. I spent an hour reading a bunch of stuff just to be able to confidently say that last sentence. People are calling it Schrodinger's Fett, which is a spin on the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. This scene was way different. This CGI Psy Snoodles didn't exist. The song was completely different. The original song is called Lapti Neck. The song that replaced it in the 1997 Special Edition is called Jedi Rocks. I fucking hate this change. As Owen Good of Polygon said of the song, quote, an overproduced intrusion that takes twice as long to add nothing, close quote. For 4 years, from 1977 to 1981, Star Wars was just called Star Wars. And then the retcon that changed it all. In 1981, for the film's theatrical re-release, the title Episode 4, A New Hope, was added. There are a lot more internal retcons and changes in Star Wars. Maybe I'll make a part 2. Bye.